Let's start by defining what a holding company is. So a holding company is a legal entity, okay? Typically an LLC, and if you have questions about the LLC part, I'll explain it. But it's a legal entity, typically a LLC, that operates as a parent or umbrella company. And it exists primarily for the purpose of holding, that's the key word, holding. That's why you have a holding company, because you want to hold other businesses, other investments, and other assets. That's the purpose of having a holding company. This can include, but not be limited to, divisions, meaning that your holding company can own, I'll circle it like this, divisions. It can own wholly owned subsidiaries, which would be other LLCs. These are other LLCs. So for those of you that have multiple LLCs, even if you didn't do it initially this way, your goal today is going to be to restructure your organizational infrastructure in a way so that at least one of the LLCs can be used as the holding LLC, and your other LLCs are going to become the wholly owned subsidiaries. Because at the end of the day, or the beginning of the day, you want to only own one company. You want to be at the top of this mountain owning one company, and you want all your other companies to be owned by you. This is the purpose of the holding company. So this can include, but not be limited to, company divisions, wholly owned subsidiaries, partnerships, intellectual property, copyrights, trademarks, patents, investments, tangible and intangible assets. So whether you have a LLC or multiple LLCs today or not, here's what your goal should be. And I have a list of things on this page to show you what your ultimate goal should be. These are the things that you should work on when you are starting an enterprise. For me, as a business consultant, an enterprise is different than just a typical business, because a business typically is just a entity that you create to operate and actively participate in selling products and services. An enterprise is made up of multiple assets, not just an operating business that's out there making money. Because most of y'all as entrepreneurs, you don't want to be working for the rest of your life, even in your own business. That's one of the reasons why you want to become an entrepreneur, because you don't want to work in your own business. You don't want to leave your job only to be hired for another job under your business, and probably don't even get paid as much as you would when you were working for someone else. And so here are the things that you want to be able to work on if you want to start an enterprise, okay? And so I have these 7 points on this paper, all right? And these are the things that you want to work on. Number one, you want to work on your holding company. And again, if you don't know how to file and form the paperwork of your holding company, if you don't know how to draft your operating agreements and all that, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But you at least need to understand that if you're going to build an enterprise, if you want an organizational enterprise and you really want to flex that thing and get to the next level, the first thing you need to do is you need to work on your holding company, okay? Work on your holding company. The next thing you need to work on when you're starting your enterprise is working on your divisions. Your divisions, these are typically your DBAs. Your DBAs. Now, one of the reasons why I like to explain that this is important is because a lot of times, if you don't understand the holding company concept and how it works, you probably don't know how to filter your ideas. So what that means is when you get an idea, you think, oh, I got to go get a domain name. I got to go get a logo. I got to start another LLC. I got to get another EIN. I got to open up another bank account. And then you end up with like 18 different LLCs and 16 of them ain't doing nothing. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And the reason why you end up with that many entities that end up becoming inactive and they never make any money, they never bring any value, because some of those LLCs or entities should have been divisions. They should have just been divisions. They should have just been like operational, experimental activities taking place under your holding company until or unless they make money, or until and unless they have some momentum where it's worth you creating an entity around. Okay. And here's where you want to work on your subsidiaries. You want to work on your subsidiaries. Okay. And I would also say your partnerships, because maybe if you're in businesses like real estate or other investments where it involves other people, this is the level that you're going to deal with it. Now, again, you don't have to do all this in one day, but you at least have to start wrapping your mind around, if I want to build a successful organizational enterprise, I need to start from the top down, and I need to make sure that I check all of my boxes, do my due diligence, because one of my rules that I teach all of my students and clients is this: do it right the first time. Do it right the first time. Okay. And then you want to work on number 4, your IP. This is your intellectual property. So it doesn't matter what kind of business you're going to operate. Okay. It doesn't matter if you operate in a landscaping business, a painting business, a shoe shining business, an apparel business, a digital marketing business, whatever the thing is that you know you need to do to make money, that will be a subsidiary. It doesn't matter what it is. It's called an operating business, an operating entity. That operating entity, even if that's the only thing you should do, should ideally be under a holding company. So I have clients that tell me, hey, all I want to do is cut grass. I just want to be a landscaper. And I will still tell them, okay, well, if you want to be a landscaper, start a holding company and then start a landscaping company. I would still tell them to do that. Start a landscaping company. Why should I start 2 companies when all I want is 1 company? Well, because if at any point you want to exit this business, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So now you can have another business that becomes your parent company, so that when you start creating IP or intellectual property, you have somewhere to house that intellectual property. So if you were starting an operating business, let's say, for example, it was landscaping, I would tell you, start a holding company, start a landscaping company that's owned by your holding company, and then start creating intellectual property on how to cut grass, how to start a grass cutting business. The biggest things about landscape that people need to learn, that becomes your intellectual property owned by your holding company. I'm telling y'all, if you're going to become millionaires as entrepreneurs, everything I'm telling you will make sense to you at some point. You will come back to this conversation and say, man, the dude was telling us what we have to do. Because all that other stuff y'all be listening to about, oh, all you got to do is get a Duns and Bradstreet and a NAV account. And all you got to do is get a credit score here. And all you got to do is get a business loan. All that stuff has its place. But I'm telling you, that stuff is not senior to you creating a solid business infrastructure that can outlive you getting a loan, that can outlive you getting a line of credit. Because I've been through those phases. I tell my story. Some of you may have heard it before. There was a time that I had at least $100,000 in credit card debt. But the problem was I was finessing my way, getting loans and filling out credit cards and getting hard money loans and merchant accounts and lines of credit. And I realized that I was really doing it because I wasn't making money in my real business. So when I started having to pay those debts back, I was over my head because I still didn't have enough revenue generating in my business to cover all these loans and credit card bills I had every month, which is why I encourage you to get those things when you can, but you shouldn't just be primarily pursuing those things. You should be building an organizational infrastructure in a way that you can sustain or self-fund what you want to do. Okay. Number 5, this would be your copyrights. This would be your copyrights. This would be your patents. This would be your patents and your trademarks. So this is where thinking about your brand and thinking about the image you want to create, thinking about all the things that you want to do, just like my business. You know, my name is a copyright. I have all of my intellectual property copyright. I don't have any patents, but I have trademarks. My name is trademarked. My logo is trademarked. I have other businesses that are active that I have trademarks on. Why? Because all of these become assets to my holding company. Okay. And then of course you have your other investments, which could be stocks or bonds or other assets. This could be cars or anything that has value. So when you're starting an enterprise, when you're just starting this whole process of the holding company and building it out, these are the things that you really need to be working on. Or you at least need to start having a conversation with yourself, with your spouse, with your team on, okay, if we started a holding company, we need to think about our brand. We need to think about what type of image we want to create. What type of trademarks can we have? We need to think about what things are we doing that could really be divisions that could run through our holding company that don't necessarily need to be other businesses. What are the subsidiaries? What things are we doing that need to be businesses? We need to look at our intellectual property because your enterprise should house an institution within itself. And we want to think about copyrights, patents, trademarks, investments, and other assets.